Howard Miller squared his shoulders in front of the mirror, adjusting his impeccably fitting tie. 55 years old, and he still looked like a man who knew what he wanted out of life. 30 years of marriage. It sounded like a judgment or a reward. He hadn't decided yet today. Elizabeth, are you ready? His voice, as always, sounded soft. It was that softness that made him a star. In the world of financial consulting, clients said it was impossible not to trust Howard. Just a minute, she said, from the bathroom of their spacious house in the suburbs of Boston. He lowered his gaze to the small velvet box in his hands. Inside sparkled a diamond necklace. 30 diamonds, one for each year they'd been together. Symbolic, expensive. That's how he'd always done things. Their 30th anniversary party was going to be the highlight of the season. In their social circle, 200 guests, buffet by the best catering, live music. Howard always knew how to impress. You look stunning, he said, when Elizabeth came out to him. Her dress the color of dark burgundy wine, elegant but not garish, perfectly accentuated her still slender figure. At 53 she looked 10 years younger. Is this for me? She asked. Noticing the box, Howard nodded. Opening it, Elizabeth's eyes widened for a moment, but then returned to their usual expression of restrained gratitude. It's beautiful, she said, in a tone in which Howard, after so many years of marriage, could easily detect a note of polite indifference. He fastened the necklace around her neck, letting his fingers linger on her skin for a second. Once such a touch had made her shudder with pleasure. Now she just waited for him to finish. The room of the Oak Ridge Country Club glowed with the light of the crystal chandeliers and the smiles of the guests. Howard and Elizabeth Miller stood at the entrance, greeting each newcomer the perfect couple, the epitome of the American dream. 30 years, admired Carol Jenkins, the mayor's wife. Share the secret. How did you manage to keep such passion in your relationship? Howard put his arm around Elizabeth's waist and pulled her closer. We get to know each other anew every day, he replied, with a smile that the press called Miller's signature. Smile and no secrets from each other. Absolute honesty. Elizabeth smiled and nodded, playing along, as she had done thousands of times at similar events. Among the guests, waiters with champagne and canapes, a string quartet playing classical repertoire. Howard noticed their daughter Natalie, a professional lawyer, talking to potential clients. She inherited his business acumen and her mother's beauty. A deadly combination in the business world. Dad, Mom, everything is just perfect. Natalie walked over to them, holding a glass of champagne. You are still the most beautiful couple I know. Just like your mother. Howard smiled, just as flattering. Elizabeth tensed slightly, but responded with a soft chuckle. Your father was always a master of compliments. It's his specialty. Excuse me a moment, Elizabeth said, suddenly noticing someone in the crowd. I need to say hello to Martha. Howard followed her with a glance. There was no Martha in that direction, but there was a young man, one of those newfangled writers Elizabeth often invited to speak at the literary club she ran after she retired from teaching. Alex Baker, 29 years old. A trendy novel that hit the bestseller lists. Hair disheveled and scarf carelessly tied, as if he'd wandered into this high society event by accident. Howard noticed his wife lightly touching Alex's arm as he spoke, slow motion fingers lingering longer than necessary, eyes meeting with a meaning that could not be put into words, body language that Howard had learned from years of working with clients. Daddy, who's that guy? Natalie asked, following his gaze. One of your mother's protégés, Howard answered, taking a sip of champagne. A literary talent, as she calls them. Too smug for a writer without a Pulitzer Prize, Natalie said with a snicker. Howard thought that his daughter had inherited from him not only his business acumen, but also his powers of observation. 2 days after the anniversary party, Howard returned home earlier than usual. Elizabeth wasn't expecting him. She thought he was at the annual conference of financial analysts in Chicago. There was indeed a meeting, but it had been canceled at the last minute. due to the illness of the keynote speaker. The house greeted him with unusual silence. Elizabeth's car was parked in the driveway, but she was not downstairs. Howard climbed the stairs, trying to tread quietly. Muffled voices came from the bedroom. The door was ajar. He froze listening. "It's too risky, Alex." Elizabeth's voice sounded worried. "Howard will never understand." Should he understand? The younger voice sounded with a slight sneer. 30 years, Elizabeth. You've given him 30 years of your life. Don't say that he's a good man. A good man? Who turned you into a decorative piece of jewelry? For his perfect life, you're a writer, an artist, and he made you just be Mrs. Miller. Howard clenched his fists. He hadn't expected them to go this far. Meeting in their shared home, in their bedroom. "I have to go to a literary club meeting." Elizabeth said Howard won't be back until tomorrow. "But I don't want to take any chances. When will I see you again?" "I'll call you." Howard went downstairs silently and left the house. Getting into the car, he watched Alex leave their house 10 minutes later, looking around like a thief. After a while, Elizabeth came out as well, in a strict suit for a literary club meeting, carrying a folder of papers. He waited until her car was around the corner and went back into the house. When he went up to the bedroom, he smelled the scent of an unfamiliar male cologne in the air. Howard looked around the room methodically, then opened Elizabeth's laptop. The password. Of course, there was a password. But what could be easier? For a man who'd spent 30 years studying his wife, he tried 3 options before the screen blinked hello. Emails, messages, browser history. Howard worked methodically, as he always did, putting together a complete picture of the betrayal. The correspondence had been going on for 8 months. Meetings in cafes, under the pretense of discussing literature, then at a hotel on the outskirts of town, and finally at their home when he wasn't around. But it wasn't the details of their physical intimacy that struck him most. It was the way she described her life with him, with Howard Miller, the perfect husband. "I live in a golden cage, Alex. Howard gives me everything, except the freedom to be myself. I'm suffocating from that perfection, from having to always conform to Mrs. Miller's image." He closed the laptop and sat down on the bed, their shared bed where another man had now visited. His hands trembled not from anger, but from a strange sense of release. Now he knew the truth he had suspected for a long time. Elizabeth did not love him. Maybe she never had. That night Howard Miller began to plan carefully, methodically, without missing a single detail, just as he planned financial strategies for his clients. 2 weeks later, Howard sat in his office, finalizing the last of his preparations. On the desk in front of him were tickets to their favorite country home in Vermont, the secluded place where they had spent their honeymoon 30 years ago. "Do you want to go to the mountains for the weekend?" Elizabeth stood in the doorway, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Now I have a meeting on Saturday." "Cancel it," Howard said softly. 30 years, Elizabeth. One want to celebrate it, just the 2 of us, without all these people, just you and me. Like in the beginning. She hesitated, and he saw a flicker of worrying in her eyes. Perhaps she was planning a meeting with Alex. "This is so sudden," she said finally. "You've never been spontaneous. Maybe it's time for a change." He smiled. "Isn't that what you've always wanted? For me to be less predictable?" Elizabeth studied his face for a few seconds, then nodded. "Good. That sounds romantic." Howard smiled as he watched her leave to call the organizers of the literary club. His plan was beginning to materialize. That evening he packed his suitcase with everything he needed for their romantic weekend away, including the small 22 caliber pistol he had purchased through a middleman 2 days earlier. When Elizabeth walked into the bedroom to pack her things, he was already zipping up the suitcase. "I've packed everything I need," he said. "I want this weekend to be a surprise for you." "A complete surprise." Elizabeth looked a little confused, but nodded. "Good. You've been acting strange lately, Howard." "Have I?" He came up to her and touched her cheek gently. "I just realized we've been too routine. It's time to bring some spontaneity back into our lives, isn't it? When he looked into her eyes, he saw a mixture of suspicion and perhaps hope there. Hope for what? That their marriage could still be saved, or that she could free herself from him without ruining her reputation as the perfect couple. "We leave tomorrow morning," he said, kissing her forehead. "I want to be there before dark." He knew that darkness would come much sooner than Elizabeth had anticipated. For her forever, Detective Lauren Connors put on latex gloves and carefully stepped over the tape and closing the crime scene. The Miller family's country home looked idyllic. Stone masonry, wooden porch, panoramic windows overlooking the woods. The perfect place for a romantic weekend and a murder. "What do we got?" she asked the CSI, who was taking pictures of the footprints on the carpet. "Double homicide," he replied, keeping his eyes on his work. "Female mid-50s. Gunshot wound to the heart area. Male mid-50s. Multiple gunshot wounds counted. 17 entry wounds. 17. Connors raised an eyebrow. "This isn't just a murder, it's an execution." She walked to the living room, where the silhouettes of bodies had been chalked out. The blood had already soaked into the expensive Persian rug, creating intricate patterns. Almost a work of art if you forgot the source. Victims identified: Howard and Elizabeth Miller. The assistant answered, handing her a clipboard of photos. "A well-known couple from Boston. He's a financial consultant. She's a former literature teacher. Recently celebrated 30 years of marriage. Who found the bodies? Their daughter, Natalie Miller. She's been trying to call her parents all day. When she couldn't, she came here." Connors nodded and began to methodically look around the room. A fireplace with photographs on the mantelpiece. The Miller family, at various points in their lives. Always smiling, always immaculate. Books on the shelves, mostly classics and contemporary literature. An empty glass on the coffee table, with leftover red wine. Time of death, tentatively between 19 and 22 hours yesterday. Weapon to different guns. Mrs. Miller was killed with a .22 caliber. One shot. Mr. Miller with a 9mm. 17 shots. Connors frowned. Two different guns to different shooters then. Or one shooter with two guns. The CSI noted. "Show me the second body." They went into the bedroom here. The mess was even more significant. A broken mirror, an overturned bedside table. Howard Miller lay with his arms spread out in a pool of his own blood. Multiple wounds gaping through his body. 17 shots. Connors muttered. Someone really hated him. She noticed an open wallet on the floor near the body. An ID in the name of Alex Baker. "We have a suspect," she said, pointing to the wallet. "Find me Alex Baker." 24 hours earlier, Howard Miller had driven his Lexus down the winding road to their country home. Elizabeth sat beside him, staring out the window at the fall scenery passing by. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the road. "Time," she answered. After a pause. 30 years is so long. "A lifetime, but not a lifetime," he said. "We have much more to go." Elizabeth turned to him, studying his profile. "Do you ever regret anything, Howard?" "The choices you've made," he thought for a moment. There was a gun in the glove compartment of the car, wrapped in a cloth napkin. Small, compact, easy to hide in his jacket pocket. "No," he finally answered. "I always got what I wanted." She turned back to the window. "I wish I had your confidence." The house was quiet and cool. Howard turned on the heat and started the fireplace, while Elizabeth unpacked. "I'll get some wood," he said, heading for the door on the porch. He pulled out his cell phone and sent a pre-arranged message. Recipient: Alex Baker. Text: "He knows everything. Come over immediately. Address 44 Madison Road, Vermont." Then he deleted the message from his history and returned to the house with an armful of firewood. The evening passed quietly. They dined on dishes that Howard had ordered in advance, and which were waiting for them in the refrigerator. They drank wine, a special bottle he had brought, especially for the occasion. "To 30 years," Howard raised his glass, "and to the truth. That will set us both free." At last Elizabeth looked at him strangely, as if trying to solve a riddle. "You've changed lately," she said. "At last has something happened." "Just realized some things," he answered, smiling. "Like how easily we mistake a lie for the truth when it's beautifully packaged." After dinner, Elizabeth said she wanted to take a bath. Howard nodded and offered to open another bottle of wine for her return. When she went upstairs, he pulled a gun from his jacket pocket, hanging on the back of a chair, and placed it under the couch cushion. Alex Baker got the message while he was working on a new manuscript in his apartment. Elizabeth had never written to him so openly. "He knows everything." Those words made his heart skip a beat. He tried to call her back, but her phone was unavailable. Then he checked her social media accounts. No activity since this morning. This wasn't like Elizabeth. Alex grabbed his car keys and wallet on the way. He kept trying to call her, but to no avail. The navigator showed that it would take almost 2 hours to get to the specified address. 2 hours during which anything could happen. He'd never wanted to ruin their marriage. At least that's what he told himself. Elizabeth was an intelligent, talented woman trapped in a golden cage of conventions and expectations. Their relationship began as literary discussions, grew into friendship, and then into something more. Elizabeth told him about her marriage. 30 years beside a man who loved not her, but the idea of her. Howard Miller had created the image of the perfect wife and expected Elizabeth to live up to it. Every day of her life, Alex pressed harder on the gas. If Howard really did find out about their relationship, the situation could be dangerous. He knew of Miller's reputation. Impeccable control, perfect life. People like that don't forgive betrayal. At the Miller house, Elizabeth came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a robe with damp hair. Howard was waiting for her in the living room, with 2 glasses of wine. Feeling better, he asked, holding out a glass to her. Yes, she accepted the wine and sat down across from him. "Howard, what's going on? Why are we really here?" He looked at her for a long time, studying every feature of her face, which he knew by heart. "I've been thinking about our marriage," he began quietly. "About what we've given each other over the years, and what we've taken away." Elizabeth tensed. "What do you mean you think of me as a jailer?" He said, "A man who locked you in a golden cage." She turned pale. "I never said not to me." He interrupted Alex. There was silence, broken only by the crackling of logs in the fireplace. "You know," she whispered at last. "For weeks now." Howard nodded. "I've read your correspondence. I've seen you together. I know about everything." Elizabeth set down her glass and straightened. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done a long time ago," he answered, pulling a gun from under the pillow. "Set us both free." Detective Connor studied the crime scene photos in her office. Reconstructing the sequence of events was not as difficult as it might seem. Howard Miller killed his wife with a shot to the heart. Then apparently he started cleaning. Cleaning products and rags with traces of blood were found in the house. He planned to dispose of the body and stage his wife's disappearance. But he was interrupted. Alex Baker, 29, an aspiring writer and Elizabeth's lover, arrived at the house and found her dead. Apparently, there had been a fight between the men. Evidence of a struggle in the bedroom, where Howard had dragged his wife's body. Alex, probably in a fit of rage, grabbed his gun, illegal as the inspection revealed, and fired 17 bullets at Howard Miller. "It's a classic love triangle," Connors told her assistant. "Husband kills unfaithful wife. Lover kills husband." "But why 17 shots?" the assistant asked. "After the 3rd or 4th, Miller was already dead." Rage. Connors replied, "Uncontrollable rage." Baker just couldn't stop. She studied the phone screening report. There was nothing unusual among Elizabeth's recent messages. But Alex Baker's phone revealed a message from Elizabeth. "He knows everything. Come over right away with an address." "That's odd," Connors muttered. That message wasn't in Elizabeth's phone. She frowned, then dialed the number. "I need a warrant to check the phone towers in the area of the Miller house yesterday, between 17 and 22 o'clock. I want to know what device this message was sent from." The door of the Miller house was unlocked when Alex finally got there, and only the light from the windows indicated the presence of people inside. Elizabeth, he called out as he entered the hallway. There was silence, then the sound of breaking glass from the living room. Alex quickly made his way there and froze on the threshold. Elizabeth was lying on the floor, a dark stain blurring around her. Howard stood over her with a gun in his hand. "There you are," Howard said, turning to him. "I've been waiting for you." Alex rushed to Elizabeth, but it was obvious that she was dead. The bullet had gone straight through her heart. "What have you done?" he whispered, looking up at Howard. "What was necessary?" he answered calmly. "She would never have left me. She cared too much about her reputation, about what people would say. We'd have been trapped in this forest for another 30 years, you bastard." Alex exhaled, rising to his feet. "And you thought you were saving her from me?" Howard grinned. "That she'd drop everything and run off into the sunset. With a young writer, you were just entertainment boy, a way to feel young and desirable again." Alex lunged at him. They fought, knocking over furniture, smashing vases and lamps. Howard was older but stronger than Alex expected. They rolled around on the floor, clutching each other's throats, throwing punches. Alex felt something resting against his side. Howard's gun. He twisted it out of Miller's hand and rolled to the side, breathing hard. "Shoot," Howard said, rising to his feet. "Do it. It'll be the perfect ending to the story. Husband kills unfaithful wife. Lover kills husband. Poetic justice." Alex pointed the gun at Howard, his hand trembling. "You planned all this." He said. "You wanted me to come here." "Of course I did," Howard nodded. "I sent that message, not Elizabeth. I knew you would rush to her rescue. A noble knight on a white horse." "Why?" Alex asked, still holding him at gunpoint. "Because it makes the story complete." Howard shrugged. "I didn't want to just kill her and stage an accident. I wanted the truth to come out. I wanted everyone to know about her betrayal." "You're crazy." "Maybe I am," Howard agreed, "but I prefer to think I'm just a man who can't stand lying. 30 years of pretending is too long." He stepped forward. "Take the shot, Alex. Prove you loved her." Alex backed away, still holding the gun pointed at Howard. "I'll call the police. You're gonna answer for what you did. And what are you going to tell them?" Howard grinned. "That you slept with my wife. That you broke into my house. You have no legal right to be here." He continued to advance on Alex, who backed away until his back was against the wall. "Give me the gun, boy." Howard held out his hand. "You're not a killer." At that moment, Alex noticed something in Howard's eyes, a madness that hadn't been noticeable before. Or maybe it had always been there, just well hidden, behind the mask of the perfect husband and businessman. "I just wanted her to be happy." Alex whispered. "She would never be happy." Howard shook his head. "Not with me. Not with you. Elizabeth always wanted what she couldn't have. It was her greatest talent, wanting the impossible." He took another step forward, and his hand almost touched the gun. "Give it to me, and I'll let you walk away. No one will know you were here." At that moment, Alex saw the smile on Howard's face, cold, calculating, victorious, and he realized he wasn't going to let him go. This whole situation was part of the plan. Howard had killed Elizabeth, and now he was planning to kill him, staging the whole thing as a crime of passion. Something broke inside Alex. All the built-up tension, the fear, the grief of losing Elizabeth, the rage at this man who had taken her life in cold blood. All of it poured out in a single moment. He pulled the trigger. A shot rang out, and Howard jerked back, grabbing his shoulder, but he didn't fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound Alex would never forget. "This is it," Howard said through his laughter. "That's the real you, not so honorable. Are you?" Alex shot again and again and again. He couldn't stop. Each shot was like a release, like an act of vengeance for Elizabeth, for himself, for all the lying years she'd spent around this monster. Howard fell to his knees, still smiling, even as blood poured down his shirt. Alex kept firing until the magazine was empty. 17 shots. Howard collapsed on his back, his eyes glassy, but a smile still played on his lips. As if even in death he had triumphed. The gun fell out of Alex's hands. He slowly lowered himself to the floor, next to Elizabeth's body, ignoring the blood that soaked his clothes. He touched her face, still warm, but already lifeless. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm late." Then he pulled out his phone to call the police, but froze. What would he tell them? How would he explain his presence here? What he had just done? Alex looked at his blood-stained hands and realized that his life had ended. The moment he pulled the trigger, everything that came next was just a formality. He threw the phone on the floor and slowly walked out of the house. The cold night air hit his face, but he hardly felt it. Alex got into his car and drove away, having no idea where he was going. Detective Lauren Connors placed the case file on her desk and rubbed her eyes tiredly. 3 weeks had passed since the double murder at the Miller's country home, and she still felt like she didn't fully understand the big picture. The information was coming together like a jigsaw puzzle, but some of the pieces didn't want to fall into place. "Any news on the data from the phone towers?" she asked her assistant, who had just entered the office. "Yes, and quite interesting," he replied, holding out a printout. The message to Alex Baker was not sent from Elizabeth Miller's phone. The geolocation points to a device that was within 50 meters of the Miller house at the time, so Howard sent the message. Connors said thoughtfully. He lured Baker into a trap. But why? If he wanted to kill his wife and dispose of the body, why draw the attention of his lover? Connors opened a folder and pulled out crime scene photos. Howard Miller, riddled with bullets, lying on the bedroom floor. There was a strange expression on his face, almost a smile. "Maybe it's not just his wife's murder," she said finally. "I think Howard Miller was planning something more. A kind of spectacle." She stood up and walked over to the board where the pictures of everyone involved in the case were posted. Howard and Elizabeth Miller were the perfect 30-something couple. Alex Baker was a young writer, confused about his relationship with a married woman, Natalie Miller, a successful daughter who continues the family legacy. "Call Natalie Miller back in for a second interview," Connors ordered. "I think we need to dig deeper into this family's history." Natalie Miller walked into the interrogation room with a perfectly straight back and a facial expression that betrayed no emotion. Even in mourning, she looked collected and in control, a true daughter of her father. "Thank you for coming in, Miss Miller," Connors began. "I have additional questions about your parents." "I've already told you everything I know," Natalie replied. "My parents were a model couple. No problems, no conflicts." "What about Alex Baker? Did you know about his relationship with your mother?" There was a second's pause, barely perceptible, but enough for an experienced detective. "Number, of course not," Natalie replied. "My mother wasn't like that." "Like what, Miss Miller?" "Unfaithful. She was a devoted wife." Connors opened a folder and pulled out a printout of email correspondence. "We found this on your mother's computer." The correspondence with Alex Baker lasted 8 months. Natalie skimmed through the pages, her face growing paler and paler. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "My mother would never." "I am suffocated by the necessity of always conforming to Mrs. Miller's image," Connors quoted from the letter. "Howard gives me everything but the freedom to be myself." "Those are your mother's words." "Miss Miller looks like the perfect marriage. Wasn't so perfect after all." Natalie clenched her hands into fists. "What do you want from me, detective?" "The truth about your parents, about what their relationship was really like." The silence dragged on. Natalie stared into the space in front of her, as if she were deciding something important. "My father," she began at last, "was a man with very high standards for himself, for his family, for everyone around him. He had no tolerance for imperfection. And your mother, she spent a long time trying to live up to it. She was better at it when she was younger. Or maybe it was easier for her to pretend." Natalie took a deep breath. The last few years had been hard. Mom talked more and more about unfulfilled dreams, about how she could have been a writer, not just a literary club host. "Did your father know about her dissatisfaction?" He knew everything, Natalie answered bitterly. My father always said that information was power. He controlled every aspect of our family life, including your relationship. Natalie tensed. What do you mean? We found something else on your father's computer, Connors said, pulling out another printout. A file detailing your dating history for the last 5 years. Names, places, dates, even financial transactions of potential partners. Natalie's face contorted with shock and anger. He was following me, it would appear so. And not just you. Connors placed another document on the table. This is a copy of the agreement between your father and the private investigator. He's been following your mother for the last 3 years, long before her relationship with Baker. Natalie covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't know, she whispered. God, I didn't know anything. No one knew, Connor said softly. Your father created the illusion of the perfect family and made everyone believe it, including you. Alex Baker's trial began 6 months after the murder. He didn't try to go into hiding, as initially expected. The day after the tragedy, Alex turned himself in at the police station. The courtroom was packed, the press, relatives, the curious. Everyone wanted to see the man who had shot the perfect husband. 17 times Detective Connors sat in the front row. Watching the proceedings. Next to her was Natalie Miller, still pale and gaunt after months spent trying to understand what had happened to her family. Mr. Baker, the prosecutor addressed the defendant. Will you tell the court why you shot Howard Miller? 17 times Alex, who had lost weight and aged over the months, looked straight ahead. I didn't count the shots. He answered quietly. I just couldn't stop. He killed Elizabeth and smiled. Said it was necessary. You're saying that Howard Miller confessed to killing his wife? Yes, he said she would never leave him willingly, that they would be trapped in this farce for another 30 years. The prosecutor came closer. And you decided to become judge and executioner. Number I. Alex closed his eyes. I just snapped. He killed the woman I loved, and he was happy about it, proud of it. Alex's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, there is evidence that Howard Miller planned this crime. In advance, he lured my client to his home by sending a text message from an untraceable cell phone. He wanted Mr. Baker to discover the body of the murdered Elizabeth Miller. The prosecutor shook his head. That doesn't justify 17 shots. Your Honor, even if Mr. Miller planned to kill his wife, Mr. Baker had no right to commit vigilante justice. My client was acting under the influence, objected defense counsel. After finding the body of the woman she loved, murdered by her own husband, Connors leaned over to Natalie. What do you think? She asked quietly. Natalie didn't take her eyes off Alex. I think all 3 of them were trapped. She answered. My father trapped by his need to control. My mother trapped by her unfulfilled dreams. And this man trapped by his illusions of love. Detective Connors' office was filled with materials gathered over the course of the investigation. She was rereading Elizabeth Miller's diary, which had been found in a hiding place behind a bookshelf in their townhouse. Today is 30 years of our marriage. Howard gave me a necklace with 30 diamonds, one for each year. Everyone knew it and awed and marveled. All I could think about was that each stone was like another stone on my coffin lid. Another year in a golden cage. I can't live like this anymore. Another entry dated 2 months earlier. Alex says I should leave. That at 53, it's not too late to start a new life. He doesn't understand. Howard will never let me go. Not out of love, out of principle. I'm his property, his achievement. Part of the image he's created. A perfect husband with a perfect wife. Connors turned the page. The last entry was from the morning of the day they'd left for the country house. Howard has been acting strangely the last few days. Offered to go to our cottage in Vermont for the weekend. First time in years, he says. He wants to bring spontaneity back into our relationship. But there's something new in his eyes that I haven't seen before. Something frightening. It's as if the mask has begun to slip. Connors closed the journal and looked at another document. Howard Miller's posthumous psychiatric evaluation. Based on his notes, correspondence, and the testimony of colleagues. Diagnosis: narcissistic personality disorder, with elements of psychopathy, control over others, as the primary way of confirming one's own importance, inability to accept rejection or loss. Next to it, lay an assessment of Alex Baker's mental state by a prison psychiatrist: post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, suicidal ideation. The report noted that Baker had repeatedly said that the 17 shots were not just the murder of Howard Miller, but the murder of the concept of the perfect marriage, which was really a pretty package for tyranny. Connors gathered up the papers and closed the folder. The case was officially closed. Alex Baker received 12 years in prison, with parole in 8. The court recognized mitigating circumstances and a state of passion. She went to the window down in the parking lot. She spotted Natalie Miller sitting in her car. Hesitant to get out. Today was the day she was supposed to pick up the last of her parents' personal effects stored as evidence by the police, finalize this phase, and move on. Connors sighed. The hardest part of this job wasn't catching the criminals, but realizing that the perfect facades often hid the darkest secrets. The trial of Alex Baker became a national sensation. A perfect marriage turned into a bloody tragedy, screamed the headlines. TELEVISION experts analyzed every detail, every evidence. Sociologists and psychologists used the case as an example of how social pressure and the pursuit of external perfection can lead to disaster. We live in a society where outward appearance has become more important than inner content, said a famous psychologist on a popular talk show. Howard and Elizabeth Miller were the icons of their social circle, the perfect couple, that's what everyone called them. But behind that facade was emptiness and mutual lies. Do you think they didn't love each other? The host asked. I think that love has long since become a habit. And then a prison. Howard Miller didn't love his wife, but the idea of her, an image he created of himself. When that image began to crumble, his solution was radical: destroy the original, to keep a copy in the public's memory. While court hearings and televised debates were taking place, Natalie Miller was rebuilding her life piece by piece. She sold the family home and country cottage, quit the law firm where she worked, and moved to another state. Too many ghosts haunted her. In Boston one day, while going through her mother's things, she found the unfinished manuscript of a novel, the story of a woman who pretended to be someone else for 30 years until she met a young man who reminded her of the dreams of her youth. The story of a cage made of gold and societal expectations from which there was no way out except through death. Natalie finished the last page she had written and closed the file. Her mother had finally told her story, albeit under the guise of fiction. Albeit unfinished, she had found her voice, even if no one but her daughter would ever hear it. Do you think about him often? Asked the prison psychiatrist Alex, who sat across from him hunched over, his eyes drooping. Who? Howard. Yes, the man you killed. Alex looked up. Every day, but not in the way you think. I think about the fact that he and I were more alike than I care to admit. In what way? We both created an image of Elizabeth that we liked. He saw her as the perfect wife, the jewel in his collection of accomplishments. I saw her as a talented woman, suffocating in a golden cage that needed to be rescued. We were both selfish. Alex grinned bitterly. And in the end we both killed her. Him physically, me, because I thought I knew what she really wanted. Do you feel responsible for her death? Indirectly, yes. If it wasn't for our relationship, if I hadn't insisted she leave her husband, Howard didn't plan to kill her until he found out about us. The psychiatrist made a note in his notebook. So you're blaming yourself for another man's actions? No. Alex shook his head. I blame myself for not seeing the big picture, for thinking that love was a simple solution to a complex problem, for not realizing how deeply Elizabeth was stuck in this relationship, in this life. He was quiet for a moment, then added, you know what the worst part is? That Howard was probably right. She would never have left him. She cared too much about her reputation, about what people would say. -1 years in one role isn't just a habit, it's an identity. Detective Connors stood in the cemetery, looking at two fresh headstones, Howard and Elizabeth Miller buried side by side, as befitted a married couple of 30 years. Together forever, read the epitaph chosen by Natalie. The bitter irony of those words did not escape Connors. Together forever in death, as in life, trapped in a perfect relationship that was never perfect. She placed a white rose on each grave and headed for the cemetery exit. At the gate, her car and a new case were waiting for her. Life went on with its secrets, lies, and rare moments of truth. Already getting behind the wheel, Connors thought about how many more perfect couples lived in the beautiful homes of their town. How many smiles hide the pain, the disappointment, the years of pretending. How many immaculate facades hid rotten foundations. She started the engine as a detective. She knew it was her job to uncover the truth. But sometimes the truth is too hard to bear. Sometimes illusion is the only thing keeping people from falling into the abyss. The sun was setting over the horizon, coloring the sky blood red. Detective Connors looked in the rearview mirror at the receding cemetery and thought that we all live in cages of our own making, to some degree, but some cages have walls so strong that the only way out is through death. That was the story of Howard and Elizabeth Miller, a beautiful couple, a flawless marriage, a perfect life, and 17 bullets as the final act of a 30-year play, in which all the actors are so fused to their roles that they have forgotten who they really are. Maybe that's the main lesson of this case, Connors pondered as she pulled onto the highway, that the most dangerous lies are the ones we start to believe.